Anyways, you guys see here, we are in a series called I Am, Jesus in His Own Words. And we've spent the last 6 weeks going through the book of John, looking at 7 I am statements that Jesus declares about himself to various groups. Some of it's public declarations, some of them are private. But with each declaration, how many of us know Jesus is not only giving us a better understanding of who he is, but he's giving us a better understanding of who we are in him. Come on. I know the world likes to encourage people to find themselves, right? You guys ever know somebody that's like, I'm taking some time, I'm just going off to find myself. You know, the world likes to encourage us to go out and see what the world shows them about themselves and what they should be doing. But how many of us understand that apart from God, when we go looking for ourselves, we will always come up empty-handed? Come on. There is no me without him, right? Apart from Creator, creation is utterly void of identity. So I want you guys to understand it's hearing things about Jesus that allows us to understand what he's like. It's seeing how he loves us. It's seeing the life that he models. And it's seeing what he does under pressure that allows us to step into the lives that God has created us for, right? We want to look for ourselves. We need to look in the pages of the Word. Come on. Lives that are found and fulfilled by the sacrifice of Jesus giving himself up for our sake. We want to go find ourselves. We find him because 2 Corinthians 5 tells us that anyone who belongs to Christ has become a new person. Come on, the old life is gone and a new life has come. So I want to encourage you today, if you're unsure of who you are or what you're doing, we have good news. We're going to look a little bit further today in discovering who we are as we discover who he is. Come on, because 1 John 3:2 tells us that we are already God's children, but he's not yet shown us what we will be like when Christ appears. But catch this last part here. But we do know that we will be like who? We will be like him, for we will see him as he really is. Come on, we will be like him. We want to find ourselves. The first place we need to look is in his word. We need to look at the life and the teachings of Jesus because God's ultimate purpose for each one of us is to see a reflection of himself when he sees us. Come on, I don't care what you've been through. I don't care what you've walked through. As I shared a little bit of where I came from this morning, whatever your background is, God has created you for a unique purpose. And although you may have tainted what you thought was God's plan for your life, he was just giving you another layer of relatability, right? Whatever you've walked through is going to help someone else walk out of something. So the deeper we grow in our understanding of him, the more we become like him. Right? So this series hasn't just been a look at Jesus in his own words. It's been a look into the heart and the character of God that he would have us to embrace and embody in our own lives. Come on now. I need a church that's ready to say, let's roll, Pastor. Let's jump in. Let's get to work, because there is a broken world drowning right outside our doors that is looking for hope when they're living in hopelessness. Come on, they don't need hype. They don't need good vibes. If I see one more Facebook post saying, send good vibes my way, I'm going to lose it. What is a good vibe? How do you send them? How do you receive them? They don't need good vibes. They don't need the daily horoscope. Come on. They need a church that's willing to shine the light of Jesus into their lives and show them what we've experienced and tell them that the pain, the struggle, the disappointment that they've walked through may be a part of their story, but in Jesus, that story's never finished. Well, I'm telling you, I'm fired up today because there is an urgency that I have not felt in a long time that we need to get out here and live. Come on, Jesus is always writing a new chapter, giving our pain a purpose. As the prophet Isaiah said, he has sent me to tell those that mourn that the time of the Lord's favor has come. That's you this morning. I want you to know we're about to turn a corner. He also says that I have come to tell those who mourn in Israel that he will give a crown of beauty for our ashes. He'll give a joyous blessing instead of mourning, and he will give us festive praise instead of despair. If you walked in here today carrying your identity, I want to tell you guys right now, the devil will not shut us down this morning, nor steal our praise. Because if this word is speaking to you, I want to hear it. There is power in the voice of a united church. Come on now. I say all of that to encourage you that if you've missed some of this series, or maybe this is your first time with us and you're hearing this today for the first time, I want you to lean in and I want you to listen. Because we all have the temptation to allow our circumstances to become our identity. Right? Don't give in. If you want to know who you are today, just look to Jesus. We were created in his image, and that potential for life change, the word tells us, is living inside of us when he sends us the gift of the Holy Spirit. So this morning, we're going to look in that vein there, and we're going to take a look at John chapter 15. Right? So this is part 7 of our series here, I Am. And over the last 6 weeks, we've looked at Jesus. This particular portion is where we've been the last few, and it's known as the farewell discourse. That is John 13 through 17, the chapters 13 through 17. You want a little theology lesson? That's what it's called. Just impress your friends. We studied the farewell discourse, right? It sounds official, but what that means is the beginning of John and these first few revelations that we saw was Jesus publicly declaring himself to be something and someone. But the farewell discourse is Jesus intimately spending time with those who were close to him. Right? We've come to call it the upper room. We know the Last Supper where all 12 of them sit on one side of the table and the waiter has a field day just handing them their food. I saw a meme yesterday that said if Country Church was in charge of the potluck for the Last Supper, Jesus would have left a lot more full. But we know the Last Supper, we know Jesus washed. In case you forgot, I can tell what you're thinking. I can tell your heart's not steady, so I'm going to answer the question before you know what to ask. That's something I want us to be encouraged by today. Maybe you're here this morning and you walked in as one of those lifetimers. Like you're a Christian lifer. Like you got the shirt. You went to every VBS for like 20 years. You taught VBS, right? Like you're it. But maybe sometimes in the back of your mind, you wonder, what is this all about? We can be real. There's no judgment here this morning. Sometimes you wonder, is it really worth it? Like, could I just go home and read the Bible and just stay where I am and not have to come out and do these types of things? Because I'll be honest with you, I've wondered it sometimes too. We all have. These guys walked side by side with Jesus, yet Jesus had to repeatedly tell them who he was. Come on, that's why the book of Revelation says we will overcome by the blood of the Lamb and what? The word of our testimony. We might see, we might experience, we might even believe, but there are moments in our lives if we remain silent that God will feel like a distant memory. It's important that we encourage one another on a weekly basis. So with that in mind, I want us to lean in and see what Jesus tells the disciples in John 15, starting here in verse 1. He says, I am the true grapevine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch of mine that doesn't produce fruit, and he prunes the branches that do bear fruit so that they'll produce even more. He says, you've already been pruned and purified by the message that I've given you. Remain in me, and I will remain in you. He says, for a branch cannot produce fruit if it's severed from the vine. You cannot be fruitful unless you remain in me. Right, I think that's pretty clear what he's trying to articulate. But as we know, he doesn't just say things once. He gives it a slight perspective change, and he comes again. He says, yes, I am the vine, and you are the branches. Those who remain in me, and I in them, will produce much fruit. But apart from me, you can do nothing. Continues in verse 6, and it says, anyone who does not remain in me is thrown away like a useless branch and withers. It says, such branches are gathered into a pile to be burned, but if you remain in me and my words remain in you, you may ask for anything you want, and it will be granted. For when you produce much fruit, you are my true disciples, and this brings glory to God. Come on, that's a good word, right? That's a good word. And I don't know about you, but that one seems like a bunt. Like that's an easy hit. Maybe even T-ball status. I am the vine, you are the branches. And as I was talking to some of the old saints, like if you've been in church for a while, you've heard that one. If you've walked through a Hobby Lobby, you've likely seen that one. Like that's that's low-hanging fruit for us. We know it. We hear it. And I'll be honest with you. I grew up in a church hearing those words so often, I said them before I actually understood what that meant, right? I'm the vine, you are the branches. Remain in me and I'll be super fruitful. I had no idea what that meant. I'm like, how are you doing today? I'm just fruitful. Just call me fruit of the loom. Like we're just living. Like we're in it. Right? I think on the surface, this seems very straightforward, right? Like stay with me and we'll see the evidence of it. But it's important, as you guys know, I like to study context and I like to see what the culture heard when they heard this, because sometimes it's drastically different than what we receive. Right? So not only does the full context carry a lot more weight than just do you and people will understand, but the metaphor and the word picture that's created here of being a vine is something that carried far more cultural context and significance in the time that it was delivered. Right? So these parables that Jesus delivers, sometimes they can seem a little odd, right? Like sometimes I read the parables and I'm like, it's a good word, but you could have gone a little better, Jesus. Right? Like, and I know pastors telling it, come on now. Sometimes I look and I'm like, I get what you're saying, but I don't understand why you're saying it like that. And then that's why it's important anytime you read word and you wonder, why is that said that way? Study the context. I promise you it will become clear. In the context here, remember, Jesus didn't have TikTok and Twitter, right? They had farming and they had sheep. Like that's what they did. They're in the Mediterranean, like they're in the Middle East. Like that's what they lived in deserts. So the imagery and the metaphors that they used then were delivered specifically for that audience. If Jesus were giving parables to us in the now, they would likely sound a little bit different and more relatable. So let us understand here. I want to show you guys, like he said, I am the gate. I'm the shepherd. That didn't mean a lot to us. He said, I am the bread of life. We all know what that would mean, so right? We all like some good free bread, right? Especially free unlimited breadsticks. I would kill for some bread right now. I've been cutting bread out since my gluten days have ended, and I've just been jonesing for like a good Outback roll. Like, give me that dark brown bread. So we're going to look at the context here. Jesus says, I am the vine and you are the branches. But unlike the earlier declarations that Jesus had as proclamations to the public, this is a conversation that he's having with his disciples here on his last 24 hours. This is an intimate conversation that he's having in this vine imagery that he delivers, especially to the group he's delivering it to, was something that those who heard immediately understood. It got their attention, right? So see, throughout the Old Testament, the term vine was often used as a metaphor for Israel or for the people of God. And often when you heard they are the vine, it was used in terms to show people who were not producing fruit. God said, I've given you a directive, I've given you a plan, I've given you a path forward, but you've walked off, right? So this is a vine, as they know. It's a vine that has died and needs to be removed. We would see time after time the people of God deemed unfruitful. And that imagery came to be representative of a pronouncement of God's judgment. They were given a task, they would walk away. They were given a path, they strayed. They were given freedom, but come on, they embraced the chains instead and created it as a part of their identity. They didn't want freedom, they wanted to be bound. They didn't want to go where God was leading them. They wanted to go where they wanted to go. And I don't know about you, but that's something I can relate to. If God was describing me as a piece of greenery, I might be a vine that was withering sometimes. And so when they hear, I am the vine, immediately their minds are drawn to the derogatory meaning that word often carried. They heard it and their ears perked, right? They knew what he was saying. And Jesus said, I am the vine and you are the branches. And it was jarring for them. It was such a juxtaposition of two different things. It was a vine that represented their sin and their failure and their shortcoming, right? The vine represented sin and rebellion, and it was withering up, so God was going to cut it off, right? Anybody remember Noah in a flood? Come on, anybody remember time after time, God had said, hey, enough is enough. Let's start over. Regardless of who was leading that vine was consistently dying. And this imagery had long been associated with letdown and struggle and disappointment that the nation of Israel continued to muddle through. But here the disciples hear the Savior of the world, right? Son of God, God in the flesh, the Word has come to life. And he is now saying, I am the vine. He's saying, I'm taking on this mantle now. I know many of you have seen others carry it, but let me shoulder this load. And I love what's happening here. So I want you guys to look at me and listen up for a moment. When Jesus says, I am the vine, what he's doing is he's saying, I've watched this long enough. Right? I've read the stories. I've seen this movie. I'm here to flip this message upside down, and we're going to shake things up because what you've been doing is not working. Come on. I don't know how many times we go through this cycle year after year, generation after generation, where we insist on trying and trying and trying. And Jesus says, I've seen it. It's not working, but it's okay. I've got a new approach. Will you follow me? He's telling them that he is the fulfillment of the years that they'd tried and fallen short. Right? He's telling them that I've seen the abundance where I'm going when you've seen scarcity. Follow me. He's saying, I am the proof. I am the truth when you've bought into the lies and the deception of the world around you. Jesus says, I am the vine, and I'm embracing the very thing that you've made a point to avoid. Come on. How many of us know Jesus ain't scared of dirty? He's not scared of broken, right? Jesus is ready to hop in and get to work. I don't know what your background might look like. I know some of your stories as much as you've shared, and you know some of mine as much as I've shared. I'd love to share more, but we don't need to lose everybody in the church because Pastor grew up a little bit crazy, right? But Jesus is saying, this is the final piece of the puzzle. This revelation here is the culmination of each statement that we've seen previously in this series. It's multiplied, it's doubled, it's pushed over, and it's the perfect illustration of what Jesus came to do in our time here on earth. Right? We remember John 3:16, right? God loved the world so much that he sent Jesus to die in our place. We remember Romans 5:8, that he came and he died for us while we were still sinners. So when Jesus says, I am the vine, Jesus is telling you, I'm going to fill the void that you're drowning in. I'm going to step into these shoes here because you have absolutely no way of carrying what I'm about to place on your shoulders. His declaration of I am the vine is the embodiment of Jesus stepping into our world, meeting us at our lowest point and telling us, I'm here to do what you can't. I'm here to be who you can't be. Come on, I don't know what your journey looks like today, but Jesus does. And with this declaration, he says, I'm bridging the gap. He says, you've carried the weight long enough. You've faced the struggle. You've wrestled long enough, and each time you've fallen. I'm here to stand in the gap and rewrite your story. I know the call that I placed on your life was great. And I know in your eyes, the fall that you've taken seems to be even greater than the call, and you don't see any way out from here. But you don't have to pull yourself up. You just have to hold on to me. Come on. That is so dang good. If you came in here today, or if you're watching this online at a later time and you feel like you've got nowhere left to go to Jesus. You might not have the fight left in you to run to him, but make your way at whatever pace you can. Reach toward him and call out his name, and I promise you, he will meet you. Remain in me, and I will remain in you. Come on, his word don't return void. Jesus says, I am the vine, you are the branches. But we don't grasp the full revelation of this declaration until he follows by saying, those who remain in me and I in them will produce much fruit. But apart from me, they will produce nothing. But I want us to understand, one of the greatest misconceptions in modern Christianity is that simply showing up is what it's all about. I don't know how many people walk through the doors on a Sunday morning and give themselves a pat on the back for being here. Yeah, we come, maybe we memorize a verse or two. If we're really spiritual, we might even shout out an amen at least once or twice a month before hopping in the car, heading to lunch, and tucking that faith away in our bedside drawer until the next time we decide to come. Jesus is saying, remain in me and I will remain in you. And if I am remaining in you and you are remaining in me, people will see the fruit of it. Come on, what's the fruit look like? I've had someone ask me before, how do I know if I'm saved? What does your life look like? Are you constantly in a state of disarray? Are you constantly fighting? Are you constantly on edge? Does everything you look at piss you off, or does sometime you look at things and say, you know what, let's see the best in this situation? What's the fruit look like in your life? Come on, somewhere along the way in these last 2,000 years, we've bought into the notion that church is a destination, right? Not faith, not faithfulness. Church is the destination, right? We post a Bible verse on our Facebook timeline. Maybe we tune into Caleb and listen to the same 4 songs all day long. Maybe we wear Christian t-shirts and we have Hobby Lobby signs hanging in our house. Don't front. I'm doing it right now. You come to my house, you'll see the Hobby Lobby signs too. I'm just saying there's nothing wrong with that. But if that is your fruit, come on, you're not getting nourishment there. It's like generation after generation traded the fruit of the Spirit for a superficial disguise before somewhere we reach the point that evidence is no longer needed, right? This is Jesus saying, I don't care how much you say it. I don't care how much you wear it. I don't care if it's tattooed on your body. I don't care if it's hanging on your wall. The way you represent my name is through your actions. Come on, remain in me and I'll remain in you. Church, I'm going to keep it real with you guys today. It's easy to fall in the rut of everyday life. And it's even easier to stop pushing yourself to grow. I can say I'm guilty of it. We've got 5 kids. We've got sports schedule. We've got bowling league. It's easy to hop in and forget that God has a greater purpose for our lives. We bounce around from place to place, and sometimes it's easier to go through the motions than it is to put in effort. But I want to ask you, how many times have you taken a spiritual inventory of your produce? What does the fruit look like? Jesus says, I am the vine, you are the branches. Come on, remain in me and I will remain in you. And with that first statement alone, I am the vine, Jesus did more than we ever could. He took our place as the vine. He stepped into our cursedness and our failure, and he said, let me take it from here. But rather than meeting that need and riding off into the sunset, the love of Jesus is seen by the promise that if we remain in him, he will remain in us. Come on, we don't have to have all of the answers. We just have to ask the right questions. We don't have to have it all together. We simply have to hold on to the one who's putting us back together. I don't care if you bring your brokenness as long as you're holding on to the one who's fixing you. Remain in me and I will remain in you. He doesn't say fruit's coming tomorrow, right? If you've ever grown anything, and you guys know I'm not an outdoors guy, but my mom sometimes plants like fruit seeds with my kids so they can see their apple trees grow. See, don't tell them it's not real. To see fruit takes time, right? You plant something. What's happening below the surface is happening before anything above the surface is seen. Come on. What's happening in the soil is something that's life-changing. It's life being birthed, but you don't see it at first. But we know it needs sun, right? It needs water. It needs good soil. It needs air. It needs all of the things that are necessary to grow. Come on, I can take an apple outside and duct tape it to the tree, but that doesn't mean I've grown an apple tree, right? In the same way, repping this shirt and telling people that I'm a Christian while never spending time growing in the ways and teachings of Jesus doesn't make me one. Don't forget, Judas walked side by side with Jesus before turning away. In this conversation, Jesus is addressing what's about to take place with the very ones who said, Lord, I would never deny you. He said, think again, it's about to happen. And less than a day after this statement comes out, sure enough, I don't know him. I've never seen him in my life. I want us to understand that the more time we spend in his word, the more we get to know his heart. The more time we spend in prayer, the more we recognize his voice. The more time we spend in worship, the more we appreciate the goodness and the greatness of God. Come on. And when we know his heart, recognize his voice, and rest in his goodness, the more our heart softens and becomes like his. Come on. The more our minds begin to shift and the more our actions start to mirror him. It's just like planting a seed. It's not going to grow without water, sunlight, and soil. We need something to grow so we can bear fruit. Jesus says, I am the vine. You are the branches. Remain in me, and I will remain in you. Come on, faith isn't seeing, it's experience the goodness of God. It's not hearing, it's receiving what he's speaking over and into us. Come on, because even as verse 2 says, those who are in him and produce fruit will still be pruned. That means that even when we're cut back, even when we feel like things might be falling through, he says that we are to remain in him. And as we rest in him, the evidence becomes more and more undeniable. Come on. You guys know I like to geek out a little bit on my research, and I'm sorry that I'm going long, but this word has me really fired up. So I was working on this word this week, and I just kept reading, remain in me, remain in me, remain in me. And I remember my youth group years. I remember sometimes showing up at altar calls at youth camp, and the preacher would get up on stage and he'd say, just rest in the Lord. Just rest in the Lord. And I'm going to be honest with you. I had no idea what that meant, but I closed my eyes and pretended that I was resting in the Lord. There may have been a time or two that I fell asleep. I was resting in my body too. Rest in the Lord, remain in me. And I've heard so many people ask over the years, what does that actually mean, right? Any of us ever wondered that? Like, what does it mean to rest? Remain in me and I will remain in you. Cool. What does that actually look like practically? So as I was prepping for the word this week, I went into the Greek text so I could see and maybe shine some light for someone who's wondered the same thing. And I felt God was telling me to leave you guys with this image as we get ready to close. The word that we translate as remain in its original text is meno. It means to abide. It's good. It's still one. It's like, what does abide mean, right? It means to wait. That's also good. It means to remain. Okay. It's like we get it. But the translation that stuck out most to me was the word endure. Remain in me and I will remain in you. What Jesus is saying here is even as you're being pruned, even as the walls feel like they're closing in a little bit, just hold on. Don't let go. Don't give up. Endure with me. He's saying when you can't stand, I'll hold you. Come on, when you can't see, I've got you. When you can't hear, you're safe in my arms. Just hold on and don't let go. Showing up is a good part of the story, but showing up broken and holding on to the one putting us back together is a far better story than we could ever write on our own. We will be known by our fruit. Come on. We will be known by our consistency. And we will be known by the way we represent him in our actions. I think for years, the church has made it far more complicated than it should be of what it means to rest in him and what it means to bear fruit, right? You've got book after book. You've got study after study. You've got sermon after sermon of how to produce fruit in 10 easy steps, right? Watch this video every day for the next 30 days and your life will forever be changed. If you're not applying the teachings, it's not going to happen, right? You have to remain. You have to endure. Come on. I started working out a few weeks ago, and my first day on that elliptical, I was ready to get off in 5 minutes. I had to endure. Come on, somebody. If I want to look like Chris over here, I'm going to have to stick with it. I have to endure. I have to trust the process because understand, nobody said that life with Jesus was going to be easy. But we're promised again and again and again that it will be worth it in ways that we can't imagine. Remain in the vine. Grow in his power. Grow in his goodness. Come on. Let his kindness fill you. Let his love and patience overwhelm you in the storm of your life. Let his love for others fill you with joy. As we rest in his peace, we are becoming gentle like him and having the self-control to say no to temptation when the world tells us, say yes. The world says, just give in. God says, don't give up. Come on, we have to endure. We have to stay faithful. We have to stay consistent. And little by little, we'll start to see the fruit begin to bloom. We're going to see that light shine through the darkness if we remain in him. We have to rest. We have to remain. We have to endure this pruning season because whatever we're facing today is not the end. I would like to suggest that maybe it's God cutting off the unnecessary weight that you've been carrying so you can put on the mantle of his holiness. Come on. Jesus says, remain in me and I will remain in you. Apart from our life source, which is the vine, there's nothing. Come on, he's not a complementary piece to our life. He's our source of life. Would you pray with me?